The sky was swollen with dark clouds, heavy with the scent of an impending downpour. Wind whispered through the narrow, crooked alleys of the village, rustling old plastic sheets that clung like tired skin to the rooftops of dilapidated huts. Chickens darted under carts, and a tired dog limped past an overflowing gutter as thunder rumbled softly in the distance. In the heart of this forgotten town, where time seemed to drag its feet and hopes dried up like cracked mud in the summer, there walked a woman whose name no one ever really spoke aloud. They called her strange names when they thought she couldn't hear: the barren one, the mad woman, the rag lady. But her real name was Zainab. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, never fully seen, but never completely unseen either. Her face, lined by years of silent battles, bore a softness that no one bothered to notice. Her hands, calloused and chipped from years of scrubbing other people's floors, held a grace that only the quiet carry. Wrapped in a faded blue shawl patched in more places than whole, Zainab stopped at the corner tea stall to buy a single biscuit, breaking it carefully into two pieces, one for herself and one for the crow that waited for her each morning on the electric pole. The stall boy didn't even look at her as he took her coin. No smile, no greeting. Just the familiar indifference that clung to her like a second skin. Children ran past her, laughing, kicking up dust. A woman selling bangles turned her face as Zainab approached, as if her very presence might dull the colors of her display. No one asked her how she was. No one asked where she was going. Yet Zainab kept moving, her eyes scanning the faces of the world like someone still searching for something, or someone long lost. Once, many years ago, she had been a wife. Briefly. A husband who vanished after a week of marriage, leaving behind only bruises and a torn dupatta. No children, no siblings, just a deaf mother who died quietly one winter night, her frail hand clasping Zainab's one last time. The world forgot her after that. People walked past her like she was furniture. But Zainab remembered everything, every glance that slid off her like rain on stone, every time she'd been offered old clothes instead of conversation, every Eid where her only gift was leftover food tossed on her doorstep. And yet she never cursed the world. She only sat, mended clothes, lit incense for her mother's soul, and fed that crow with a patience only loneliness can teach. Until one day, on another gray morning, something changed. At the edge of the bazaar, just beside the trash heap where wild dogs often fought for scraps, a faint whimper caught her attention. She turned her head sharply. It was not a dog, not a cat. It was a child, a baby, wrapped in a filthy shawl, shaking from cold, cheeks tear-streaked and dust-smeared. People passed by, their faces turned away, their pace quickening. One woman muttered, "Probably an addict's kid. Leave it." A man barked at the shop boy, "Move that thing away from the front." But Zainab walked toward it, slowly, as if her feet already knew something her heart hadn't yet accepted. Her hands trembled slightly as she bent down. The child opened his eyes and reached out with one small, desperate hand toward her. In that moment, the wind seemed to stop. The rain finally fell, and someone nearby whispered with disgust, "Now she wants a child?" The words sliced through the air like a blade, but Zainab didn't flinch. She only looked down at the boy and pulled him close to her chest, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for that single heartbeat. The rain poured like the sky had broken open, washing the dust from the earth, but not the judgment from the people's eyes. Zainab cradled the boy in her arms, wrapping him tightly in her shawl, as if shielding him from both the cold and the cruelty around them. Her feet, soaked and heavy, carried her home, a single-room shack that smelled of rain, old books, and incense. She laid the boy on her tattered sleeping mat, boiled some water over a kerosene flame, and mixed it with milk she had been saving for herself. He drank like he hadn't tasted warmth in days, and when he fell asleep, curled beside her, like he belonged there all along. Something shifted in her heart. Something ancient and aching began to heal. The next morning, people noticed. They saw the child clinging to her dupatta, his hair now combed, his cheeks wiped clean, his tiny hand clutching a biscuit. Whispers spread like wildfire. She took in a stray. Who gave her the right? What will she feed him with? Her silence? But Zainab never looked up. She never replied. Instead, she bought more rice, stitched more clothes, and started skipping her own meals to save for the child. She named him Yusuf, after the dreamer. Weeks passed, then months, and then it happened again. A second child. This one abandoned in the back of the mosque, his cries echoing off marble walls, and ignored by worshippers, too busy reciting mercy to show it. Zainab found him wrapped in a plastic bag like garbage, his face blue from cold. She brought him home too. Then came another, tied to the leg of a broken Shar-Pei in an alley, covered in ants, silent from trauma. Then another, left at her doorstep with a note that simply said, "You keep them. You're already ruined." And then the fifth, found sleeping under the bench at the train station, barefoot, clutching an empty bottle as if it held memories. One by one, she took them in. Not because she had enough food, not because she had space, but because their eyes reminded her of herself, unwanted, unheard, and human. The villagers began to scoff openly now. Is she running a shelter or a circus? They'll grow up wild, thieves probably. She's doing it for money. There's some foreign aid in this. Just watch. No one offered help. No one brought milk or diapers or blankets. But they all talked. At night, Zainab would rock the children to sleep one by one, singing old lullabies her mother had once hummed to her. She stitched clothes from old fabric, turned broken toys into games, taught them stories by candlelight. Her room, once echoing with emptiness, now pulsed with the laughter of 5 little boys. They called her Ami, not because she told them to, but because her touch felt like the word itself. She never asked where they came from, what they had seen, or why no one wanted them. She only gave them what the world never gave her, home. And still, the village judged. When one boy fell ill with fever, she rushed him to the local clinic. The doctor laughed. "You think love cures pneumonia?" he sneered. When she couldn't pay for the medicine, she offered her only silver anklet. The nurse hesitated but took it. She returned barefoot, carrying medicine in one hand and the child in the other. The people saw her as pathetic, delusional, a woman clutching at straws in a sea of broken dreams. One day, someone scrawled "witch" on her door in red paint. Another time, the children's only cricket bat was snapped in two by local boys shouting, "Go back to your real mothers." But Zainab, ever silent, stitched that bat back together with rope and tape and taught her sons how to play again. Despite the world's cruelty, the boys thrived. They learned to read under a flickering bulb. They recited prayers with clarity and joy. They helped Zainab sell stitched handkerchiefs at the market. One day, a boy named Iqbal, her third, stood up to a shopkeeper who insulted her, saying, "She's my mother." "You don't talk to my mother like that." The shopkeeper scoffed but didn't speak again. Something was growing in those boys, something deeper than education or food. It was dignity, roots, a sense of worth. And it was born entirely from one woman's refusal to abandon them, even when the world had. Still, there were nights Zainab cried silently into her pillow, afraid she wouldn't be able to keep going, afraid someone would take the boys away, afraid she might fail them all. But each morning, when 5 pairs of arms wrapped around her and 5 sleepy voices whispered, "Good morning, Ami," she stood a little taller, walked a little stronger, and believed just enough to try again. Years passed like pages fluttering in a windstorm, some torn, some inked with joy, some too painful to reread. The boys grew tall and strong, each with their own quiet scars, yet rooted in the soil of Zainab's love. Yusuf, the first, became thoughtful and gentle, always the first to notice when his mother's hands were swollen. Iqbal was fierce, protective. never afraid to speak out against injustice. The second boy, Raza, was quiet but brilliant. He could fix anything, from a broken watch to a cracked radio. The fourth, Aman, had a gift for words. He could charm even the most cynical shopkeeper with a few sentences. And the youngest, Sammy, was pure sunshine, clumsy, kind, and full of questions. They were her world. She stitched their uniforms by hand, combed their hair before school, and waited every evening with warm rotis and a tired smile. She never let them see how often she went hungry so they could eat. She never let them feel the weight of the sacrifices stacked like bricks on her back. She simply lived for them. But the world around them hadn't softened. It only watched, waiting for a crack, a mistake, a reason to shame her. It came in the form of a fire. One dry, cruel night in midsummer, a blaze tore through the lane behind the bazaar. Sparks flew like angry insects, devouring wooden stalls, crates, and everything in their path. People screamed, ran, poured buckets of water that sizzled uselessly against the flames. Zainab's shack, old and patched with love, stood in the fire's direct path. The children weren't home. They had gone to a distant field for a cricket match. She was alone when the first embers touched the roof. Neighbors shouted at her to run. "Leave the house. It's just things." But to Zainab, that house was not just things. It was the cradle of every memory she had left. She ran in to grab the bag of their school certificates, the hand-sewn photo album, the one cracked frame that held her mother's faded picture. But the smoke was thick, black, angry. It filled her lungs like poison. She stumbled, tripped, hit her head. Her shawl caught fire. Someone pulled her out just in time. A stranger, a laborer from another street. She was barely conscious. Her fingers burned, her ankle twisted. Her home turned to ash behind her. The children came running as the sun rose, their faces twisted in disbelief. Aman dropped his bat. Sammy began to scream. Yusuf dropped to his knees beside her, whispering, "Ami, Ami, say something." The villagers gathered, some feigning concern, others whispering blame. She should have just left. Why did she go back inside? Now where will they all live? And then someone said it aloud. "This is why women shouldn't raise children alone." That single sentence, cruel and jagged, hung in the air like smoke. The boys heard it. They stood up, all 5 of them dirty, tear-streaked, furious. Iqbal turned to the man and said, his voice steady, "She raised us when no one else would. She gave us food when you gave us shame. She gave us a name when we had none. You want to talk about what women shouldn't do? She did what men failed to." There was silence, a deep, bitter silence. The man scoffed but didn't reply. Others looked away, some ashamed, others simply uncomfortable. That day, something inside the boys broke, but something else began to rise. Fire may have burned their home, but it ignited a spark in them that could no longer be ignored. Zainab spent 2 weeks in the hospital, her hands wrapped in bandages, her voice reduced to whispers. Each day, one boy stayed behind to care for her, while the others went to school, worked odd jobs, and tried to rebuild what little they had. They slept in the corner of an old warehouse, dirty, leaky, but safe. When Zainab opened her eyes, she saw them curled around her bed, sleeping on the floor, holding her hands in their own. She wept then, not from pain, but from a kind of love that most people spend their entire lives chasing and never finding. She had nothing left, but she had everything that mattered. And the boys, they made a decision. One night, as Zainab dozed under the soft light of a hospital lamp, Yusuf whispered, "We're going to change everything, Ami. You'll never suffer again." The others nodded. It was not a dream. It was a vow. They started small. Raza began repairing electronics for free, gaining a reputation in the village. Aman began writing letters to newspapers, to NGOs, to anyone who would listen. Iqbal got a part-time job at a mechanic's shop. Sami danced at weddings, made people laugh, brought home tips in a cracked tin box. And Yusuf studied harder than ever before, waking before dawn, staying up past midnight, tutoring other children for extra income. Their bond grew tighter, their purpose clearer. They didn't just want to survive anymore. They wanted to prove that what their mother built was not a mistake. It was a miracle. And slowly, the world began to notice. The same villagers who once mocked Zainab now nodded at her in the street. The same shopkeeper who insulted her offered discounts. The man who called her a witch asked for Raza's help fixing his fan. She didn't forget, but she forgave. Not because they deserved it, but because her heart had never been built for hate. One afternoon, years later, a local journalist came to their door. Word had spread of the 5 boys raised by one mother. She asked for their story. Yusuf looked at Zainab, who simply smiled and said, "Tell them the truth, all of it." And so the story began to travel, beyond the village, beyond the city, and something no one could have imagined began to happen. Scholarships arrived, donations trickled in, and finally a letter, hand-delivered, offering all 5 boys full admission to a prestigious university in the city. Paid in full, it was the turning point. But the boys didn't cheer. They sat in silence, eyes brimming with tears. And then one by one turned to Zainab. "We'll only go," Yusuf said, "if you come with us." She never imagined herself leaving the village. Her entire life had been spent walking the same narrow lanes, touching the same cracked walls, smelling the same air thick with dust and memory. But when the train pulled into the city and she stepped down, held on either side by the boys she once found, half-starved, abandoned, nameless, Zainab felt something new blooming inside her. Disbelief, yes, but also pride. The city was loud and fast, towering buildings like monuments to dreams, traffic that snarled and screamed, strangers who didn't stop to stare or whisper. It was overwhelming, but it was also freedom. The boys had secured a modest apartment near the university, one room for the 5 of them, one for Zainab. She resisted at first. "Why waste space on me?" she had said, but they insisted. She was their heart, their beginning. The boys cooked for her now, fought over who got to wash her clothes, massaged her feet after long days. They never let her carry bags, never let her sit alone. On weekends, they took turns taking her to the park, feeding pigeons, buying her kulfi, telling her all about their classes, their professors, their ambitions. She would smile quietly, eyes soft, hands folded in her lap, nodding as if each word was a drop of honey she could store forever. People in the building started noticing them. 5 sons and one mother? Someone asked. All hers? Zainab just smiled. She never explained. Let the world wonder. They had taken the surname Zainab for their university records. Not a father's name, not an orphan's dash. Just hers. At first, officials questioned it. "You all have the same last name?" But the boys stood firm. "Yes, that's our mother." And eventually, the name stuck. It appeared on every ID card, every school record, every award. Zainab, a name once spat in alleys, now written in gold ink on certificates of merit. Their grades were excellent. Iqbal became a student leader. Raza interned at a tech firm. Aman began publishing articles. Sami joined a theater group and became known for his comic timing. And Yusuf, ever steady, began tutoring underprivileged children for free after classes. Reporters began arriving again, but now with cameras, notebooks, and gentle questions. "What made you do it?" they asked her. She looked at them and said simply, "They reached for me. I couldn't let go." One day, the university held an event honoring extraordinary mothers. Zainab was invited. She wore the only new dress she had been given in years, a soft green shalwar kameez stitched by the boys. She sat in the front row, hands trembling slightly, as each of her sons took the stage and spoke, not just of their achievements, but of her. They didn't talk about their biological mothers or fathers. They talked about the woman who found them, fed them, raised them, defended them, taught them how to be men with soft hearts and strong backs. They didn't hide their past. They held it up proudly as a story of rising from ashes. The auditorium filled with tears and standing applause. People stood up, not just for the boys, but for her. A woman who had once been spit on in the market now stood in a room filled with applause as flowers were placed in her hands and garlands around her neck. Later that night, when they returned home, the boys made her sit in the center of the room. They placed before her 5 letters, job offers, one from a major tech company for Raza, one from a respected newspaper for Aman, an acting contract for Sammy, a scholarship for Iqbal to study abroad, and for Yusuf, a fellowship to start a school of his own, named whatever he chose. Zainab looked at them, speechless, eyes glistening. They knelt before her, grown men now, strong and shining, and said in unison, "This is all yours, Ami. Every step from here is yours." And for the first time in her life, Zainab wept without fear, without shame, not from hunger, not from pain, but from joy, from the miracle of having been proven right in a world that had called her wrong for so long. Years later, when the world had changed and the boys had become men who built homes of their own, homes filled with love, color, and laughter, they still returned to Zainab every weekend. She no longer walked through the village lanes with her eyes downcast. Now she sat in a quiet garden outside the modest home they had built for her, surrounded by flowers the children had planted with their own hands. A small sign outside read, "Zainab Cottage," and underneath carved carefully in wood, "Where every soul is wanted." She never asked for such honor, but they insisted. She had given them everything when she had nothing, and now they gave her everything she deserved. Children from the neighborhood came to her every afternoon. She told them stories, braided the girls' hair, listened to the boys talk about school and cricket.